There is famine in our house. We will all die of hunger. If you do not quickly arrive here, we ourselves will die of hunger. Just imagine carving that into a clay tablet. It's a desperate 3,000-year-old cry for help from the doomed city of Emar in inland Syria. And honestly, it perfectly captures the sudden, terrifying fragility of what was once a highly globalized, thriving world.
Welcome back to today's Explainer. Risk analysts, students, and history buffs, I am so excited to guide you through this briefing. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of an ancient disaster, the Late Bronze Age collapse, which hit right around 1200 BC. We're going to look at exactly how incredibly advanced, deeply interconnected empires just fell apart, and we'll use those lessons to uncover some pretty profound insights into our own modern systemic vulnerabilities. So let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. First up, we'll establish what peak interconnection looked like back then. Then, we'll look at the perfect storm of stressors, map out the multiplier effect, and evaluate their attempts to stop it. Finally, we'll look at the echoes in our modern fragility and explore the natural cycle of rebirth.
All right, Part 1. Peak Interconnection, the Bronze Age Network.
To really grasp how far these empires fell, we have to understand how incredibly high they climbed. The Late Bronze Age, stretching from roughly 1550 to 1200 BC, was a highly integrated system. You had at least 8 major cultures, from the Mycenaeans in Greece all the way to the Egyptians, deeply bound together. Just look at the excavation of the Uluburun shipwreck. It's a perfect snapshot of how deep this trade ran. The ship itself was made of Lebanese cedar, the crew was likely from the Levant, and the cargo? It had Canaanite and Mycenaean pottery, plus essential metal ingots. It's literally a floating cross-section of a globalized economy, representing multiple distinct cultures working together in a highly complex supply chain.
Let's ground this concept a bit by looking at the specific raw materials moving through that supply chain. We're talking copper, tin, gold, silver, and glass. Now, the absolute lifeblood here was bronze, and to make it, you needed copper from Cyprus and tin from far to the east. The vulnerability? Heavy reliance on single-source trade routes. It was incredibly lucrative, absolutely, but it introduced a massive fatal systemic risk. It's like a giant puzzle. If one crucial piece goes missing, or one link in that chain snaps, the whole economic machine just grinds to a halt.
And that brings us to Part 2, stressors, the sudden perfect storm of catastrophic events that struck just after 1200 BC.
So, what went wrong? Well, according to the archaeological and textual records, pretty much everything at once. They faced invasions from a confederation known as the Sea Peoples, who wreaked havoc across the eastern Mediterranean. But it wasn't just warfare. The environment itself turned on them. Modern studies of ancient pollen, lake sediments, and cave stalagmites conclusively point to a mega-drought. And we're not talking about a couple of dry summers here. We're talking about a crippling 300-year mega-drought that totally strangled the region's agricultural foundation. That triggered the widespread famine we heard about in our opening quote. Add to that a series of seismic storms, literally, back-to-back earthquakes shaking cities to the ground.
This evidence from Mycenae, down in southern Greece, gives us a really visceral sense of the horror. These are the remains of an earthquake victim trapped in destruction debris. A stone crushed her skull right inside her own home. It is a grim, sobering reminder of the human cost of these sudden forces of nature. Now, any strong civilization might struggle to recover from an earthquake like this. But what happens when the earth shakes, the rains stop, and foreign invaders show up on your shores, all at the exact same time?
That question leads us right to Part 3, and really the core thesis of today's briefing, the multiplier effect. A civilization might survive one disaster, but a rapid succession of linked catastrophes? That's a different story entirely.
Let's map out exactly how this domino effect works. Step 1. A mega-drought strikes, absolutely gutting crop yields. Step 2. That lack of food triggers widespread famine, forcing masses of people out of their homelands just to survive, which likely spark the massive migrations of the Sea Peoples. Step 3. This wave of violent migration and general chaos severs those vital, single-source international trade lines. Step 4. Without food, without trade, and without the raw materials to run their economies or armies, mutually dependent empires pull each other down into the abyss. It is a total systems collapse.
So, Part 4, too little, too late. How did the powerful leaders of the Bronze Age react to this? Did they have the foresight to mitigate the disaster? Well, they definitely tried. Take a look at this 15th century BC painting from the tomb of Unsu. It shows Egypt's massive fleets of ships. During the crisis, the Egyptians actually launched a form of grain diplomacy, sending emergency food shipments to starving ports in Anatolia and northern Syria to prop up their trading partners. And archaeologists have even found evidence that the Egyptians were over in the Levant actively crossbreeding drought-resistant cattle and crops. They were desperately trying to engineer their way out of a changing climate.
It is incredibly fascinating to compare those ancient mitigation efforts to our modern international climate aid protocols. The intent is exactly the same, right? An institutional, cross-border response to stabilize a failing region. But the crucial takeaway here is that those individual attempts by the Egyptians to halt a systemic collapse completely failed. It was simply too little and way too late. When the entire underlying system is fundamentally broken, a few isolated aid shipments just cannot stop a domino effect of that magnitude.
Which brings us to a really critical pivot in our explainer. Part 5, Echoes in Modern Fragility. Let's put 1200 BC side by side with our world today. Back then, they faced mega droughts, mass migrations, and severed trade routes. Today, we're dealing with extreme climate change, global pandemics, and an intense reliance on highly fragile, optimized global supply chains tied to specific trade hubs. We've got complex diplomatic embargoes and conflicts actively disrupting global grain and energy markets. The parallels are honestly quite stark. The massive lesson from the Bronze Age is that no society is invulnerable. Just because our tech is better doesn't mean our global systems are immune to the multiplier effect.
So, we really have to ask ourselves this foreboding question. Are we standing at the edge of another perfect storm of stressors? In our modern economy, the fortunes of the US, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East are totally intertwined. If multiple pillars of our global society are stressed at the exact same time by climate extremes, disease, and geopolitical conflict, are we nearing a similar breaking point?
But, history isn't just a story about things falling apart. It's also about what comes next. Part 6, the cycle of rebirth.
Because for every end, there is a beginning. When the dust finally settled, centuries after the 1200 BC collapse, the Mediterranean was entirely transformed. Out of the ashes of the Bronze Age came the Iron Age. We see this shift beautifully represented by artifacts like this Iron Age ivory plaque from the northern kingdom of Israel. We saw the rise of fresh civilizations, the Neo-Hittites, the Israelites, the Phoenicians, and the Greeks. We got the widespread use of the alphabet and a huge leap in iron technology. It just goes to show that while collapse is brutal and agonizing, it is often the exact thing needed to clear the brush, allowing entirely new ideas and societies to flourish.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. The big difference between us and the empires of the Bronze Age is that we are actually scientifically aware of what is happening to our climate and our supply chains. But awareness isn't the same thing as action, is it? Does our modern technology genuinely offer us true resilience against today's global crises, or are we just building a taller, far more interconnected house of cards? It's a critical question that every policymaker and risk analyst has to answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.